Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Dalmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechvalley.com, and now columnist for the Jewish Press.
And I'm having fun doing all of that, and someone who has a really fun job is our guest today, the Albany Police Chief, the Police Chief of the City of Albany, not Albany County, but City of Albany, Brendan Cox. So welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you very much.
First time that you're on the show with us. We had your predecessor on once, but you've been in the job about a year.
Yes.
And coming up on a year. So
yeah, it will be. I was the interim starting right around April 1st of last year, and then I was appointed the chief over, I think, in July.
Yeah. So I'm glad that we gave you some time to get used to
Time
the
to settle
position.
down.
But as deputy chief, you didn't really need to have a warm up. You were already indoctrinated. I saw you conduct meetings and around the neighborhoods and stuff. So you were already well on your way.
Yeah.
So how are you settling in? How's it going?
Things are going well. We have a lot of really good initiatives going on. I have a great police force. The men and women of the department are just amazing.
How many are there then?
So there are 342 sworn officers, and then there's another 100 and some civilian, non-sworn. So there's
feel
about
that's enough?
540.
That's enough, you feel? I mean, there's always people want more.
We can always do more. So I would never, certainly to do what we do in Albany, I think we have enough officers, but for a lot of our outreach programs, that takes up a lot of our resources. And those are initiatives that I would never want to do away with.
Right.
So, to say that I would never want more officers would not be true, but we have a pretty good size.
You talk about the outreach program, and I know that, I don't know if our viewers can see it, but that you do, that's your main cover. It's not like shooting a criminal. Oh, what do police do? They take out the revolvers and go shooting everybody. Can you see that? Mark will help that out. But your cover story is, teaching little kids. So, talk about that outreach program, because I think it's interesting. A lot of people, I think, have the wrong idea of the police. They're just to beat up people or shoot people. You think of a police officer with a gun. But, they're, like you say, they're doing outreach. But talk about that a little bit.
So it's always been a part of policing to do outreach. But in 2010, we changed our philosophy to a community policing philosophy. And it's really about working with our community to problem solve and to make sure that we're working together on the same page and that we understand, the community understands from the police side and the police understand from the community side. It's really the only way to do business, because we are in the public service job. So we need to make sure that we're on the same page. So one of our goals in that picture is actually called winning over a generation. And what we do is that we do a lot of work in the field with our kids, from kids that are crawling and doing a reading program to kids that are 15, 16 to 18 and 20, of really trying to make sure that we're engaged and that we have positive engagement and that we are able to break down some of the barriers that we have to deal with. And it works for a lot of different purposes. I mean, first and foremost, we want our kids to look up to our officers, and we want our kids to consider our officers, that somebody that they can go to when they need help.
I wanted to ask you, when we had the fire chief on, we asked him what his, if he was at full staff, full capacity, and he said, well, off by 2 or 3, and since then he's got that. What would be full capacity?
Well, 342 sworn officers is our full capacity.
Full capacity.
So
Okay.
you're always talking having some shortages, because when somebody retires, we can't necessarily hire right on the spot for that person, because we rely on the Zone 5 Law Enforcement Academy to do our training. So there's usually 2 classes a year. So one usually starts in January and one usually starts in July.
And there's 6 months.
So that's correct.
Training. So let me ask you about, so you have this 342. The town of Colony is a little bit less population than Albany, about 10,000 less maybe. If that, maybe even, it might be closer. And the size, the square mileage is about the same. So how do you compare with town of Colony with their police force? Are you at this, are they also at 342?
No, I don't know what their numbers are, but no, we're definitely the largest police force
So
in
how do
the
they
capital
do,
area.
if they have a comparable area, how do they do it with fewer police officers?
Well, I think that, part of it is certainly the type of policing you do. Colony is a suburb, and we're a city, and we have some special things that we need to make sure we do in an urban setting. We want to make sure that we put things out like footbeats. We want officers out walking the street and dealing with the community. In the town of Colony, I don't think you really have too many spots that you would, I don't want to speak for Chief Teal, but I don't think they have too many spots where they would put a beat out. I know they do some stuff with bicycle patrols, and they certainly practice community policing. But in an urban setting, we have a much different situation where we need to make sure we have extra resources so we can do things like community policing. We also have the fact that, this population grows by a lot in the daytime. We're the seat of state government and county government, so we have to make sure that we account for having enough resources when that grows. We also have St. Rose, SUNY.
Right.
So, we have a ton of educational facilities, so our population ebbs and flows throughout the day. So we tend to need more resources based on being an urban police department and having that kind of population.
It's also crime rate also, wouldn't it be? It's just not people and people. You have to see what the crime rate is.
Yeah.
There's more crime in the city.
It's just
than more
interesting
police.
because it says, everyone says, well, if everyone was armed, you'd have less crime. And, it's like, well, if you didn't have police officers, maybe you'd have less crime, or police officers what's the ratio? How many police officers per person?
Whatever it works out to 342 versus 100,000 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotta do the
My
arithmetic yourself over here.
math days are long
So-
done.
But, okay, so now you grew up in the Upper Ward in Wood Terrace.
Yes.
Yeah, we have some people I know who were on Wood Terrace, the Pagoda family?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Very well.
So they were in the Jewish community, but how does that compare, because I'm on the upper wards also, with the lower wards and where you have to assign various officers and patrols?
So you certainly go, when it comes to our city, first of all, we cover the whole city no matter what. So whatever ward you're in, wherever you live, you ultimately have police service. And you usually will have a zone car out in some of those wards, and we work with the neighborhood associations out there to make sure that we're doing community policing out there and engaging as well. But when you start talking about looking at crime patterns and looking at density of population and looking at where your schools are, where your educational facilities are, where your after-school programs are, you're going to have more police in those areas. Certainly, we have in a great deal of the city, we have officers that are not only out in patrol cars, but we have officers that are out on foot beats and they also ride bicycles.
But do they have
So-
to be more aware of certain things in the lower wards as opposed to the upper wards? Are they, like, when I go to the neighborhood association meetings in the upper wards, they talk about a bicycle being stolen or out of a garage because the garage was unlocked. To me,
I go to neighborhood association meetings throughout the
Yeah.
entire city, and I got to tell you that the issues that people bring up aren't much different by ward to ward. Mainly when you go to listen, I go to these meetings. So
Yeah,
when
because
you
the
go
way-
to some of them, most of the time the first concern is traffic safety. That's normally, no matter what's going on in any of the different areas of the city, that's one of the first things you talk
I
about
had
in a neighborhood association meeting.
one person stood up and said, well, Niagara Mohawk or National Grid, when they take down a pole, when they put up a new pole, they don't take down the old one.
Yep.
And we got double poles. I'm from Brooklyn. These are not real
I'll tell you what, if
issues.
you go to a neighborhood meeting in Brooklyn, and I bet you get the same kind of complaints. Those are the issues that concern people. People are concerned with quality of life issues.
Okay.
Certainly, when there is a violent crime, people are obviously concerned about that.
Yeah.
But when you get down to the individual neighborhood associations and you get
Yeah.
down and you actually sit down and talk to the folks in the community about what's going on in their neighborhood, you will get very similar complaints, whether you're in Albany or Brooklyn. Certainly, like I said, if you're having a streak of violence, that neighborhood's going to be very concerned, and you need to make sure you're working with that community to eradicate that.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, when you sit down and talk to people, people are still people. So what bothers somebody in one end of the city is going to bother somebody, the same thing's going to bother them in another end of the
Do
city.
you think that We had the DA, the Albany County DA on, and we talked about the different offices that he has, Special Victims Unit, Major Crimes, and all this. Do you have similar demarcations like that? Or
So we have ultimately 5 investigative units. We have an information coordination unit, which works in our crime analysis center to really break down patterns of crime, get information out, get intelligence out. We have criminal investigations, which deals with basically crimes that are committed by adults against adults. We have a community response unit, which investigates gun violence and drugs. And then we have a children and family services unit that comprises of a unit that takes care of crimes that are committed by or against anybody that's under the age of 16. They deal with missing persons under the age of 18, and then they have a domestic violence unit that deals with specifically with domestic violence. So you really have to look at what your categories of crimes that are occurring, and just make sure that you have people that have training, because there are certain things you want to make sure that people understand how to deal with investigating a sexual assault or investigating a domestic violence incident. But ultimately, police officers were called upon to deal with anything that's in front of us. So we also need to make sure that we have cross-training and people understand how to deal with just about everything, whether it's a double pole or a serious crime.
You know, I'll just tell you one incident that we had to deal with. You know, I'm in a rabbi, so we take in everybody almost like we're like social workers and guidance counselors. And this person, this woman, she, even though I live in Delmar, but she lives in Albany in Thurlow Terrace, and this a number of years ago, and she was mentally incapable, and she called us up, and the policemen were ready to take her away in a nice way. They weren't, and you know, my wife said
That's
was
how
very
we deal with
impressed.
most things, in a nice way, Rabbi.
Yeah, well, no, that's what my wife was very impressed. I just remember the policeman, she could hear over the phone just saying, "We're not going to hurt you. We're just trying to help you." You know, it's not like that. So I'm saying people think, oh, the police came in with their guns and they're, you know, shooting.
Rabbi,
you know.
I don't think people, I truly don't believe most people think that. I think there are a small group of people that think that's how we come in, but I think the majority of people understand that we have a very professional workforce, and we deal with a lot of different issues, not just crimes. We need some other folks to step up a little bit, but we deal with a lot of different issues, and we deal with those issues very professionally and very humanely, and I think most people recognize
I have to give you credit for the community policing bit, because I had a situation where someone was coming to my house. I wasn't quite sure if this was a scam, and I asked for the community officer to come to my house. He was off that day, but he called the next neighborhood over, and the guy came over and asked a few questions and stuff, and you know, made me feel better, and he took the time. It was 5-10 minutes, but still, it was an important 5 or 10 minutes. So, you know, I got to tell you, kudos to the police department for that type of engagement, and not just taking it, you know, taking it seriously, and not just, you know, shooing it away, saying I can't deal with this. You
right.
know?
Oh, we have to
So-
be able to deal with everything, and I think that's an important thing. It's you know. We're the ones that are open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So when somebody doesn't know how to deal with something, or something pops up, people will call us. So we have to be ready to deal with a lot of different issues. But you know, a lot of it's having patience and understanding and some empathy, and that goes a long way. And you know,
And it's been, what I'm saying is that these are words, but it's been translated into action.
Yeah.
So I wanted to let you
Thank
know
you.
about that. Raise the age. Can you tell us how you stand on that, if you feel that's a good thing, or?
You know, I think it's got to be done, and I know that there are others in law enforcement that don't necessarily feel that same way, but I think it's because we need to look at what the system is and recognize that, yes, we need a way to deal with individuals that are committing violence, and those categories need to be dealt with in a certain fashion. We already have things within the Family Court Act and within the penal law to deal with when, you know, when a 14 or a 15-year-old commits an act of violence. There's opportunities to charge them, and actually there's an opportunity to charge a 13 if you had to, 13-year-old as an adult. So there are methods in place to deal with that, but I think the majority of our 16 and 17-year-olds, and again, some 16 and 17-year-olds commit violent acts and we need to deal with them and put them in jail. But I think the majority of the 16 and 17-year-olds that we deal with, we need to find different ways to do things. Simply put, the brain is not wired to be completely mature at 16 and 17. In fact, it takes a lot longer than that. But when we're talking about individuals that have impulse controls and aren't really sure of what they're doing at many times, certainly by definition, they know right from wrong. But I think we need to start dealing with people in a different fashion. And the fact that 48 other states have the age above 16, that they have 17 or 18, the majority of them are 18. I think we can learn from those states. I think that there was a good set of recommendations that went forth. Was every one of those recommendations perfect? They weren't. But we should be able to somehow figure out to agree on, I think there was 38 recommendations. You know, what of those 38 can everybody just agree on and start implementing? I think that when we treat our 16 and 17-year-olds as adults and we put them in a situation that they're not going to be able to recover appropriately from, I think that we have to recognize that we can do things differently.
And the governor has set aside, I guess, the Hudson Correctional Facility to put the 16 and 17-year-olds sort of in a separate area because it's sort of, as we say in Yiddish, nicht hier, nicht here. You know, you're neither here nor there, and you're in the middle, you know, where you have...
I mean, listen, you think about
you
when
have
you're
to have a
16.
special
Yeah.
prison for just them. I mean,
Sure, I mean, you want to get them away from the general population. You know, if you have a 16 or a 17-year-old being influenced by somebody who's in their late 20s or early 30s or older than that, who's been through a life of crime, do you really want them to influence those 16 and 17-year-olds?
and they do.
Sure.
They do when they're in the same pen.
You know, I just want to, because we're on the Jewish view, so I always like putting the Jewish view of crime and punishment. But if you read in the Bible and the Talmud actually says also that someone steals, what is their punishment? They don't put them in the jail. You have to pay double. Well, what if you don't, you can't, you know, you're poor and you don't have that money? Well, you'll work it off. So who's working off? Who's going to pay? Someone who's normal, meaning has a farm and has a, you know, the middle class kind of person. So instead of just incarcerating them, hey, you're working in the field and you're going to work it off. And, you know, and you're going to live amongst normal people, because sometimes it is. I know that people live in these, you know, wild situations, one parent and they're on drugs, you know, again, I counsel people. So again, what kind of home life are they living? What kind of, you know, neighborhood are they living in? And here, go out to a middle class neighborhood and act like a normal person. And that's the way to reconstruct a person, like you say, rewire them, as you were saying, to be a normal human being.
Let me ask you about this safe storage law. You know, I think you're in favor of it because it passed the Common Council here, but what's the issue there? And the opponents have, you know, their arguments against it, but...
Sure. So, I mean, I think anytime there's anything that touches the Second Amendment, people get certainly concerned about that. And I think that what the safe storage general city ordinance does is it's just meant to try to have somehow have a layer of security for folks to be able to secure their weapons at home, especially when there's a child around. Certainly education is always the best thing, but recognizing that if we can keep a gun from getting in the hand of a kid who might hurt themselves by mistake at home, or have that gun stolen, because we have guns stolen during burglaries, and those guns turn into crime guns, that if we can somehow better secure those weapons, then that's better. It's not meant to take anybody's rights away.
And
it's just when it's really just talking when that weapon is not under some kind of control from the owner.
But if the gun is in the household, where does it stop where government becomes intrusive? I mean, if, you know, like we heard an argument that bicycles and tricycles hurt children, so should we be putting license plates on bicycles and tricycles?
We have helmet laws for bicycles for kids, don't we?
Well, yeah, so
I mean, you know, there's rules of the road that bicycles have to follow.
And you also have to have certain smoke detectors and stuff
Sure.
in your house, so...
Sure. The difference in the
I'm
argument's
saying-
always going to come back to that, you know, riding a bicycle isn't mentioned in the Constitution.
Yeah, right.
So we have the Second Amendment, and I think we have to make sure that in law enforcement, I mean, the first thing we're sworn up to uphold is the Constitution of the United States. So I think we just have to make sure that when we do things that we're not violating people's rights, and that when we do things there, they make some more sense and they don't go to punish. I mean, I have no no desire to send the officers into people's homes, knocking on their doors and going, hey, is your gun locked up? This is really, we've approached this in the city as a really educational piece. We have to look at gun violence, and we have to look at the issues that we have, and we have to look at them from an education, prevention, and enforcement end. So what we've really tried to do with this general city ordinance is educate people, and we've tried to also give them resources. So if somebody wants one of the gun locks to put on their guns, they just have to come into one of our stations and we'll give them one for free.
Right.
Things like that, where you try to take steps to keep the public as safe as you can without trampling on the rights of the citizens.
One of the things that I also heard with this is that you have, you get the gun stolen, let's say, from the house. Do you still have community guns in Arbor Hill and South End? I mean, we used to hear that they're hidden under staircases and...
You hear that term, and I think that term got a lot of play, and ultimately what it is that, when we have our groups that are involved in violence, they certainly share certain things. And, to say that they might share a gun or know where to get it, that's really where the community gun came from. That,
Right.
If I'm involved in this group and I need a gun, where do I go to get it? And unfortunately, we have people that know how to go get guns, and kids that should never even deal with a gun.
But there still are these community guns out there?
We've kind of gotten away from using the term just because people did start to think that, now there's guns hidden under stairs and in weeds. And I don't know that I would necessarily say that that's occurring. We've had times where we found guns in vacant property and things like that. So there's no doubt that there are some folks that are secreting their weapons that way. But I think what's better to find is that there are individuals who, if you're part of a certain group or a gang, that you might know how to get a hold of a gun from somebody else within that group, and that would be considered common property amongst the group.
Okay. So let me just ask you about body cameras. What's going on with body cameras? You got a grant from someplace?
Yep.
Or tell us?
So we got a grant from the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Assistance.
The federal government?
Yes.
Okay.
For $133,000. That's going to go towards some purchasing of the cameras. But the important piece about the grant is that the grant, and this plays right with our community policing philosophy, calls for us to get a broad stakeholder group together and address the different fashions of issues that can come up, so that way we have a strong policy and strong training before we implement the body cameras. So instead of just saying, hey, here's $133,000, go buy the cameras, you guys do whatever you need to do and figure out what policy you want to do on your own.
Yeah.
The government's doing a good job of saying, hey, we recognize that there are privacy issues. We recognize there are retention issues. We recognize there are discipline issues with the cameras. So instead of just doing that, let's get everybody to the table and let's actually come up with a good, solid policy and good, solid training before they're implemented.
So what's going to happen when the individual citizen gets body camera too? We're going to be taping you, taping us.
They already are.
You know?
There's everybody who's got a cell phone out on the street, which is pretty much everybody you run into. My kids have had cell phones for a number of years, and their cell phones, all have capability to record. So people are already doing that. It makes it
It's better
sometimes
than, it's better than each of us having guns and having body cameras.
People feel there's a certain transparency, level of transparency and accountability with the cameras.
Yeah.
But the cameras aren't the end-all, be-all either. And the New York Times over the weekend, they did a really good job of a researcher of laying out different videos where he controlled the scenario, and what a body camera would show, what an in-car camera system from a unit would show, and then what somebody would, one of the cameras like you have here, would actually capture. So they're not the end-all, be-all. I'm happy we're getting them. I think it's a good thing. That being said, in a perfect world, I'd much rather not have to have anybody have a camera to prove that we're doing the right
So
thing.
you're only going to have enough for a quarter of your force?
No, we're ultimately going to outfit every patrol officer with them. So the cameras themselves aren't that expensive. It's the storage that's expensive.
The storage of them?
So as we move forward, we haven't picked a product yet. So depending on what product we go with will depend on the storage. Because there are some people, and this goes both ways as well. There are some people that want that video saved for a long time. And there are some people that say, no, that video shouldn't be saved for a long time
Well,
because of
it's
privacy
digital.
issues. Sure.
So
So if
it
you
could
use
be
if you use the
saved
cloud, you can
Yeah.
certainly, you can save it forever. But remember, if you start talking about, you have 40 officers on a shift sometimes. If those officers are all out capturing video on their body camera, you start running out of storage very soon.
No, but you would put it, like you were saying, either on the cloud or you would download it to something.
So-
and clear your.
Right. So I mean, but you still have, that's also a resource there as well. So you have to balance all that.
I got to ask you a
Yeah,
quick
but I
question.
just wanted the
Yeah,
cameras,
yeah.
are they to protect the policeman or I'm just saying, what was the purpose of them, or the victim? I mean, I'm just saying that.
So what I would say is this, I would say that they're meant to be able to show that there's a greater level of transparency and accountability, and you can have a better idea of what happens on the street for when there are those miscommunications. But there's also an evidentiary piece of them. You're going to capture evidence that's going to be utilized in a trial at some point. But I think they're to everybody's benefit. I think the benefit is that at the end of the day, you and I could have a discussion out on the street, not agree to something, both walk away. We could both go to Mark with completely separate stories because it's all your point of view, right? So the camera will help, I think, clear up some of those. Most of our complaints are about things like that. Like, I didn't agree with how the officer talked to me, or the officer said this. So some of them are perception based. So if you can actually play that video for both facts, for both the citizen and the officer, to say, hey, here's what really happened. You guys are you're both there as the general incident, but you're both off on what you're talking about. So let's see what really happened.
And now, if I have a car camera, and there's this idiot speeding and passing me at 90 miles an hour, and it's caught on my camera, and I got the license plate, can I go to the police station with that video, and you can do something about it?
So you can always come to the police station, and we can always do something. That's one of the things we try not to ever have, that the word said, there's nothing I can do. So when that gets said, we usually look at things and go, well, we can always do something. That might be a situation where it's just a simple find out who that driver was and at least talk to them about slowing down. You certainly might not be able to issue them a uniform traffic ticket, but you certainly might be able to at least make a phone call.
Unless you see it, unless the
So,
police
yeah,
officer sees it.
for a vehicle and traffic law violation, you don't have to witness it, but you have to be able to prove it. So does that video in itself necessarily prove it? Now you get into, well, the video camera's not necessarily going to have the speed on it. Now we have to make sure your car's calibrated. So it brings some intricacies into it. But we write traffic tickets on accidents. But we do that based on the investigation. So if we know that somebody went through a red light and they were the ones who caused the accident, we can make a case to write that and not witness it. But we're going to do that based on the evidence. So it really comes down to the certain circumstances.
How is the red light camera experiment working?
So I think the results we're still waiting the results. I'm only concerned about one result, and that's public safety. So we have 35 now that are functioning at 20 different intersections. And what we're trying to really measure is, first of all, did we reduce accidents, specifically accidents that involve T-bones, because those are the accidents where people get the most injured in. So are we reducing that? Are we stopping people from running through the lights? Are we changing people's way of driving?
Yes, you are.
And I would say anecdotally that
Because
we are.
You put up all these cameras on the intersections that I go through. Someone
you
knew
have
which
one
intersection.
less criminal mark over here.
It gets people to slow down and recognize that.
And you don't know when it's going to turn yellow. What are you going to do? And
So-
I've gone through a yellow light.
And you're fine going through a yellow light.
And I found that out.
Yep.
But it was on Second and Frisbee,
Yep.
So I just.
So one of the benefits of the red light camera system, and again, I know it's another controversial issue, but one of the benefits is that we're making sure that we're making changes to how we engineer things. So our red lights now throughout the city are all, for a yellow light, are all 4 seconds. They used to be 3 seconds.
Okay.
Some of the technology we had to wait some of our infrastructure is a little old. So as we get new equipment, it's very easy to change that timing. But that right there in itself, changing a yellow light from 3 seconds to 4 seconds, that actually is a big improvement on safety. So anywhere throughout the city, that's what we've done. But we wanted to make sure that when we installed these cameras, the goal is this: it's to have 2 zeros every month on those reports. It's to have no accidents
Okay.
and nobody going through
Well,
those,
the mayor
those
would
red
be
lights.
disappointed with the budget.
Well, no, I don't think she would. She recognizes this as a public safety issue. If there was no public safety
She
issue
should put
here.
zero in the budget, and then whatever happens to come in is surplus, and not commit
so-
$2 million.
So put the budget aside.
Yeah.
The mayor still understands that this is a public
Exactly.
safety issue, and that's
Exactly.
why
I
we
know.
have the
I know
cameras.
she does, and I got that.
If
and
these
I-
cameras didn't result in an increased amount of safety and only increased revenue, we wouldn't have done them.
Right, I
Because
know
that's
that.
not
And- and
fair or appropriate.
I don't doubt that, at all. How, do you know how many tickets were issued already?
So off
Just
the-
out of-
I should
off
have-
the top,
I
I'm
should-
just asking. Is it in the hundreds, is it in the tens?
It's in the hundreds. It's well over 100. It's
You see,
it's a good
I
amount
got
of
stopped
tickets.
in Brooklyn, going through Church Avenue, and I got a picture of my car
Yep.
in the mail, and I said, you know, at least I got something. Here's the $50. It's an expensive picture, but at least I got the picture. I sort of felt
And that's the
good
way it
about-
works here. You get in the mail, you get a picture. It gives you actually a website to go to with an individual identifier. You get to pull it up and watch the video and go, I did go through the light. And sometimes the videos, again, back to video. Video is not
right.
always the best, but this video is good video. But we actually had one situation where somebody thought that they had taken a right on a green light. And when we were able to bring them in and actually show them the video on our system, we were able to zoom right in on the light, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, that's not what happened." So people, by all means, people still have a lot. There are a lot of the complaints is, that this is taking away people's rights.
No, but
but it's
people-
really not, because
but-
there is a process to go through.
But people, like you were saying, are not lying. They're just have a misperception.
Oh, yeah.
And they shouldn't feel like they're being, crucified over something like this.
And if I let the rabbi borrow my car and he goes through a red light, well, if I have to pay that $50 and come back and ask the
No.
rabbi for the $50, that's
I
my
asked for a
business.
donation. That's what I would do.
That's what we would make it. Simple
You know what?
donation.
I'm glad you picked on him and not me. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. We're out of time, and it was a good time with you over here. But, I do think that it is a difficult job being a policeman, and the police force, you're doing a great job in keeping the people of Albany safe.
And
Thank
thank you
you.
for your
Thank you
service.
very much.
Thank you for your service.
Appreciate that.